Hey y'all, Kelly Moody here. Welcome to the Ground Shots podcast, a podcast that explores our relationship to ecology through conversations and storytelling. This episode of the podcast features a conversation with Doug Elliott, who hails from the foothills edge of the Appalachian Mountains in western North Carolina, just outside of Asheville. Doug is a storyteller, but also an herbalist, naturalist, basket weaver, musician, and performer. And he educates about the natural world through his stories. I saw Doug Elliott at Rendezvous Earth Skills Gathering this past fall and asked him if he would be on the podcast. And he said yes, so we had a conversation over the next little bit of time, and we met up in December, made a day of it at his homestead that he runs with his partner, Yana. And I brought my friend Squirrel over that day, and we also offered to help in the gardens and around the land as well after the recording. So actually, while I talked with Doug inside on the couches, Yana and Squirrel went out on the land and had some tasks and projects to do, including cutting kindling, and they ended up finding a ton of these really awesome shrimp mushrooms, and I have some photos on the blog post for this episode from that day, just a couple, including some of the mushrooms we gathered and all ended up eating together later with some of the taro and sweet potatoes that Doug and Yana grew. So it was awesome to stop by their place and help out and hang out. There's always lots of fun, food, laughter, excitement on the land whenever visiting there. So Doug's been telling stories for decades across the continent, but has primarily focused his time in Appalachia, especially southern Appalachia, where the diverse ecology and history of the region provide endless inspiration and rich opportunity for sharing about the importance of these mountains, community, plants, and animals. He tells stories and sings songs of local lore, and often he tells stories and sings songs with others joining in a band or with his son, the mycologist Doug Elliott, which a couple of the songs that are featured in this episode include Todd singing or playing fiddle, so stay tuned for those. And Doug does speak about Todd and Yana a bit more in the podcast too. Often he tells stories around the fire where children and adults alike never seem to grow bored of his tales. And with his huge internal library of work, I often feel like when I listen to his stories, I never hear the same one twice, or at least the same version twice. To hear a list of the songs and stories featured in this episode, refer to the show notes, and at the end of this episode, I also read out loud the list of what we feature here, which is over 10 different songs and or stories. And you also can download Doug's full albums and more complete stories on his Bandcamp page, which I'll have linked in the show notes. So this episode's a little different. We're featuring a live interview, Doug and I sitting down and chatting, intermingled with pre-recorded songs and stories that he's had recorded over the years, some of them live, some of them in a studio. So it's kind of an interweaving of our sitting down this past winter solstice time and years of story work. To support this podcast financially, which is listener funded, subscribe monthly at patreon.com/fsedgeandsalt. And also, I'd love some more reviews on iTunes. There are over 50, I believe now, all 5-star reviews. People have left notes there too. I would love to see more reviews and written out reviews too of people's feelings about the podcast. So if you have the time or energy, take a moment and go on iTunes and leave a review. I would love that. So with that, let's go ahead and get to this conversation with Doug Elliott. There'll be lots of music and pre-recorded story in here, so enjoy yourself and happy listening, y'all.
Well, as a naturalist or a biologist, I keep thinking, what is any self-respecting groundhog doing out in February anyhow? Groundhogs want to eat greens, tender young things. February, that's the middle of the winter, the heart of the cold weather. Usually anything tender and green is going to be frozen stiff in most places, and a lot of times under snow and ice. You wouldn't think there'd be much out there to interest a groundhog. Well, in the southern mountains where I live, we don't get a lot of snow, but when we do get snow, it usually comes around the end of January or early February. Well, I love to go out after a good snowstorm. Usually I let it set on the ground for one night, and the next day I go out. I love to follow the animal tracks. In the summertime, you see a deer or a fox. You get a fleeting glimpse of this animal as it leaps away, and that's all. In the wintertime, though, if there's a good track in snow, you may never actually lay eyes on the animal, but you can be with that animal for hours. You can see everything that animal did. You can follow along, see where it fed. You can see its interactions with the environment. If it's a predator, you can see where it caught its prey. You can see where it peed. I mean, you can tell just about everything that animal did. You can sort of be with that animal and begin to understand its life, what it was doing, where it was going. To me, that's such a revealing time, such a great time to be out in the woods. Tracks are like stories. You can just follow along and they'll lead you off through thickets and mire and mountains and deserts on classic mythic journeys, journeys into the great narrative of life. Well, it was early February and we'd had a good hearty snow. I'd gotten up early in the morning and went up on the mountain. I had followed deer tracks and I could see where they had bedded down and where they had browsed in the thickets. And then I got onto the trail of a bobcat. It's like you hardly ever get to see a bobcat, but I felt like I got to see that bobcat through its tracks as they wound through the rhododendron thickets. I saw a place where it laid and rested up under the edge of this rock cliff. I could see where it lay there looking out over the thicket, and I found a little tuft of its fur there stuck to the ice. I smelled it, and that little tuft still had a faint, wild feline smell. Wow, essence of bobcat. Well, I wandered all over that mountain that day, and as I was heading back down, I see this set of tracks going across the trail. I looked, and they had little fingers on them. Look, a coon, huh? Well, I hadn't followed a coon in quite a while, and sure enough, it was heading for a creek. That made sense. You know, coons love to work along the creeks, turn over rocks, find crawfish and salamanders and minnows. So I'd started following those tracks, and they went right to the creek. But then there'd been no disturbance in the creek at all. The track just went right across and went up the other side of the mountain. And there was a vine hanging down there right beside the tracks. And on that vine, I see a bite mark. I looked at that bite mark, and it was a cut, like as if a knife had hit it. That was no coon that would leave teeth marks like that. This had to be a rodent with sharp cutting teeth. I looked at that track again, and I could count only 4 toes on the front paws. A coon has 5, a groundhog has 4. This was a groundhog. What was a groundhog doing out wallowing around in the snow? Well, I was going to find out. It hadn't eaten the bark off that vine, just went sort of bit it as it walked by. And so I followed along, and it went on around the mountain, and it came to a hole, a groundhog hole. And there was a bunch of footprints all around the entrance. I could see where it went in, and I could see from its muddy footprints where it came out, tracking mud from the inside of that hole across the snow. You could see those tracks heading around the mountain again. Well, I got right on his trail again, and I followed. Found another hole. The tracks went into another hole, finally came back out. I could see the muddy footprints in the snow again. It went into another hole, and I kept following. And another hole. It went in and out of 7 different holes by the time I got tired of following this groundhog. Well, I couldn't figure it out. I never saw any sign where it ate anything. Well, I went back and was talking to some of my neighbors. And I said, now, what was that groundhog doing out this time of year? And my old buddy Theron says, son, don't you know what he was doing? This was a mating season. That was an old boar groundhog. See, buddy, he was out hunting him a mate. Well, he wasn't looking for anything to eat. He was looking for love in all the right places. And, of course, I couldn't tell what went on inside each of those dens because the tracks don't tell you everything.
Well, Doug, thanks for sitting down with me. I guess it's mid-December, almost winter solstice, sitting in your cozy house. Yeah, thanks for taking the time to sit down with me and chat a little bit.
I'm glad you're here. Glad to be a part of this little adventure.
Yeah, totally. So maybe you could start by, where are we? Because your place is in this really cool area of Western North Carolina, and you've been here for quite a while, and maybe you could kind of give a little bit of a context for where we are in like many ways that can be.
Well, we're at about 1,200 feet, not in the high mountains, but we're sort of right at the edge, right where it starts. As you go up there, we're at about 1,200 feet here. You go up on the mountain behind the house, it goes about 2,000 feet. When you look south and east, you see the Piedmont begin. When you look north and west, you see the mountains looking like the waves of the ocean. So we're kind of right at this little turning point.
Mm-hmm. It's like southeast of Asheville.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. Rutherford County or
Rutherford County.
Yeah. So it's not theoretically the Piedmont quite yet, but it's right on that edge of the mountains.
Right on the edge.
Yeah.
Sometimes people ask me, how did I end up in North Carolina? And I always said it was biodiversity and cultural integrity. Biodiversity, like where we're sitting right now, we're about 40 miles from cotton fields. We're also about 40 miles from spruce fir forest, like you'd see in New England or Canada. And so we talk about diversity. That's what we got here in western North Carolina. And because the area has been a little less traveled and a little less accessible, there's more cultural traditions that are still intact around here. So to me, it's been a real honor and a pleasure to be able to get to meet some of the older mountaineers. They've kind of been mentors for me.
Yeah, I grew up in the Piedmont, more deep Piedmont, and there's definitely obviously a lot of old tradition in some ways, but the stories and like relationship with plants and stuff are not things that especially wild plants, are not things that I grew up hearing as much about. And like coming here, maybe it's the geography, there's other aspects of this area that make it more conducive to those things being preserved. I feel like that the more isolation of like what the mountains create,
Maybe less arable land, so there's more steep slopes. There's got to be more wildness and wildlife.
Yeah, totally, for sure. How long have y'all been on this piece of land?
More than 30 years.
30 years. Wow.
Sort of amazing to look at little trees that we planted as little sprouts. Think, holy cow, we did that. It doesn't seem that long, but it's really been
just
a
a
while.
blink of an eye, all of a sudden.
There you go, all of a sudden.
It's this big.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you've been growing a lot of your own food too for that whole time.
Thank goodness I have a hardworking wife, and she's the main gardener. And she has hundreds of varieties.
Yana.
Yana's her name.
Did you grow up interested in a lot of the things that you're interested in now? Because people know you as a storyteller, an herbalist, a naturalist.
I was always a nature kid.
Yeah.
And when I was a kid, I had little cages with snakes and frogs and things like that in the backyard, and it never stopped. And so it's fun sometimes. Sometimes I'll be along the trail with a group of people, taking people on a nature walk, and I'll be point out something, and give them a name of something, and realize I learned that when I was 8 years old. So it's such a, I feel so privileged to be able to just continue that lifelong passion.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Maryland.
Maryland,
right on the estuary of the Chesapeake Bay.
So more like central east side of Maryland?
East side of Maryland, on the western shore of the Chesapeake Bay, near Annapolis.
Okay, cool.
And it was nice because it was a wonderful place to grow up because it was a little bit wooded. It was before the big development started. And there was salt water, and it was also fresh water. It was right that interchange. Everything was brackish. So there was fish and crabs and sailboats and swamps and snapping turtles and snakes and all that kind of stuff that I loved.
Like all meeting right there. Yeah, the Potomac River's not too far.
Right.
Coming in.
This was the Severn River, but one of the other estuaries.
Your parents into this kind of stuff?
They were supportive parents. They put up with it.
They put up with it.
And then they encouraged me.
Yeah.
It wasn't like their thing, but they knew it was mine.
I think that's one of your stories. You have a bunch of albums on your Bandcamp. Some of them are just songs, some are live recordings, some are just like more stories. And you had one more telling your stories of travels when you were in your 20s probably.
Right.
And I think there's one where you're talking about something with your parents and wanting to go hitchhiking, and your dad was basically saying go for it, and your mom was like, no, don't do it.
He just wanted me to do it safely. He had hitchhiked when he was young. He picked up hitchhikers. Yeah. And he just said, stand in a place where you can be seen. Earl, we don't want him hitchhiking. No, but make sure bring a sign if you can. Make sure there's room for somebody to pull over. Make sure check him out before you get in the car. Earl, I don't want him hitchhiking. That's right, we don't want you hitchhiking, son. But if you do,
yeah. But if you do, be safe. Yeah.
America. I've come to look for America. I've come to look for America. I loved it. Standing out there beside the road with my thumb out. Oh, that open road was the path. My thumb was the key to the universe. To me, that stream of traffic was an ongoing series of opportunities for hope. Every car contained infinite potential, untold mysteries, great lessons to be learned. Every ride was a window into another world. I am a poor wayfaring stranger, traveling through this world of woe. In some ways, we're all wayfaring strangers, and we're walking through a pretty rough world. Like the song says, it's a world of woe, a world of heartbreak and sadness, but it's also a world full of miracles and joy and laughter, and it's a world of wonder and mystery. And it's out of that great mystery we're brought over. We're brought forth. We're born into this world, and we travel along in this stream of life on a grand, glorious, mythic journey. And what a trip it is. We live and walk upon the earth trying to make what connections we can, trying to make sense of it all, and after a few short decades, we pass right back into that great mystery. And as a way of speaking about this great journey that we're all on, I want to tell you about a trip that I took a while back. Of course, and if we're going to talk about a journey, we'll have to talk about home. I'm only going over Jordan. I'm only going over home. Well, I went to college in the tumultuous 60s, and somehow I actually managed to graduate with a degree in art. I was radical, idealistic, excited about life, and pretty darn unemployable. I guess that's still the case. My bank account was low, and still is, I guess. No way could I afford a car, but I had a high spirit of adventure and an intense curiosity about the people and the world around me. There were two things I wanted to do. I wanted to live in the woods so I could commune with nature and do art. But I also wanted to explore and travel around, see the country. I had an opportunity to stay in an old family house at the edge of the White Mountains in New Hampshire for a low rent. So this is what I chose to do first. And the North Country was great. I roamed the woods and the mountains, and I skied, and I drew and painted pictures. Sometimes I'd hang canvases in snowy pine forests, and I'd travel to them on snowshoes, painting till my fingers grew numb. The time was rich and full there, but the travelers was getting stronger and stronger all the time. I wanted to see the country. Everybody in those days was looking for America. I'll come to look for America. And everyone was California dreaming. California dreaming on such a winter's day. I wanted to check out California. I wanted to explore the wonderland. I wanted to look for America too. And maybe I might find myself along the way. I wanted to hit the open road, stick out my thumb, and see where it would take me. And sure enough, on April Fool's Day, 1971, I extended my educated thumb and I hit the road. I was heading out of New Hampshire, heading south, heading west. By golly, my eyes were wide open. I was looking for America. Actually, my first ride was with friends over to the coast of Maine and then down into southern Connecticut. Then I rode the commuter train into New York City. Now, I had a friend in New York, and I was planning to check out New York City and then visit some friends in New Jersey, stop in on my folks in Maryland, and then head west to California. Well, I'd gotten into New York and I was wandering down the street when something there at the edge of the sidewalk caught my eye. I picked it up and looked at it. It was a brass pin with a rugged screw fastener on the back. The front of the button said Dartmouth Outing Club. Dartmouth Outing Club, I muttered to myself. Looked to me like it had 2 tennis rackets on it. I thought, Dartmouth, that's one of those Ivy League schools. I thought, must be some bourgeois tennis club. Now, don't you love it? Here I was hardly more than a bum in the street, picking stuff up out of the gutter, talking to myself, and there I was blathering out my own radical brand of snobbery and judgmentalism. But over the years, I've noticed that whenever I'm able to step beyond or rise above my judgmental attitudes and look a little closer, I usually learn something. And when I looked closer at that button, I saw it had a date on it. The date was 1921. This was 1971. This pin was 50 years old, a half a century old. And when I looked a little closer, I could see those weren't tennis rackets engraved on that pin. Those were snowshoes. And right below the snowshoes, there was a pair of cross skis. And I thought about it some more. Dartmouth. That's in New Hampshire. Well, I'd grown pretty fond of New Hampshire in the last few years, and I'd done a lot of snowshoeing, and I'd crossed skis more times than I'd care to mention. Well, I could relate to that pin, so I fixed that button on the lapel of my 60s chic army fatigue jacket and went bouncing on down the street.
Well, I tried to study biology, but they kept giving me chemistry and math and said, you got to have chemistry and math if you're going to have biology. And that was really hard for me. And I did a bunch of shifts and majors and realized I always could draw pretty well. Let me just go into art. And that was perfect because art doesn't inhibit anything. And it allowed me to illustrate my books. Mm-hmm. And even sold a few paintings occasionally.
Mm-hmm. So you could take your interest in animals and plants and the natural world and translate it through the art without having to deal with the chemistry classes.
I honor people who know chemistry. I wish we knew more chemistry. We're growing turmeric. We want to find out which turmeric has the best curcumin content. Which, how do you deal with the oxalates in various taros and different plants? Mm-hmm. So chemistry is so important for that. We keep looking for a good food chemist.
Maybe somebody who's listening will be able to do that for you, because you never know. So you went to college for art, and then you, after that, kind of...
There I was, trained as an art major, and there you go, with a radical mind and spirit of adventure and totally unemployable. I had access to an old family home in New Hampshire, and so I went to New Hampshire for a while, and that was great because it was the North Woods, and it was fun to be up in there. I think, but eventually I kind of missed all the creepy crawlies. There weren't so many creepy crawlies that I grew up around, and I found myself traveling, wanting to come south.
Mm-hmm. The North is not as creepy crawly. Like, I spent some time in New Hampshire too. It's like a little bit lighter air, still humid somewhat, lighter air, a lot more snow, obviously, more conifers. Birch trees,
Beautiful country.
But you could maybe actually lay on the ground and not have anything crawl on
you. I have chiggers.
But you down here, you never know what's going to crawl on you. Yeah. I hadn't been in the South for 5 years, or like spent a lot of time in the South for about 5 years, and then this summer I was like, oh yeah, everything wants to eat you alive.
Well, I realized as an aspiring artist, I was trying to do all these art projects and not really finding a very good way to make a living, and realized that I better learn how to grow some food. So I started a garden, and all these weeds came up in the garden, and somebody gave me a Stalking the Wild Asparagus book from Yule Gibbons. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden I realized that all the weeds in the garden, practically every one of them, was edible and perhaps more nutritious than the plants I was trying to grow. And that kind of opened the world to me a little bit. I remember going out in the backyard and thinking, I know most of the trees, I know most of the birds, I know most of the reptiles and amphibians. What about all these other wildflowers here? So I started with the Peterson Field Guide. I remember looking up one flower after another just to get it. I remember going out in the yard and there was this yellow flower, and I looked it up again, and St. John's wort. Oh, I looked it up yesterday. I remember the name, but I hadn't remembered the plant. And I realized that once I started to learn that I could use the plants, then all of a sudden even the Latin names would stick. And next thing you know, it was this whole exciting world where all these useful plants were just showing up for me. And I started making some herb teas, and this was years ago, before there was like an herbal revolution going on. And I would take the herbs and teas and old time remedies and go to folk festivals and sell herbs and teas. I remember one time I went to a little festival. It just had started with an art festival, but I brought my herbs and I brought a couple paintings and things. And this guy came up to me and he said, "Oh, this is beautiful stuff. I'd love to have this in our store." I said, "What's your store?" He said, "Erewhon Trading Company." Now in those days there weren't health food stores. I mean, sometimes there were some they'd sell bottles of pills, mostly. There was two natural food companies. There's Erewhon East and Erewhon West. Erewhon East was in Boston, and so I went and I talked to the president of the company. The president of the company was Paul Hawken, and Paul Hawken became actually wrote books about ethical business and things like that later on. He was part of Smith and Hawken Tool Company, but he was the manager of that company, and he said, "Well, this would be interesting. Maybe we could, if we could order these herbs wholesale, and we could repackage them, and we could sell them. And we need someone to kind of straighten that out. Maybe that's the kind of thing you could do." And I thought, wow, I could go work for them. And so I thought, so I worked out with some friends to stay in Boston, and I showed up a week or two later, and he said, "Oh," he said, "I was thinking about the idea. I didn't say we were ready to do it.
Oh, shoot.
But you're here already. Do you want to just work in production for a week or so? Let me think about this whole thing, and we'll see what we can do." So I worked in production, and it was an amazing company. I mean, they would have a macrobiotic cook would come in and cook a meal for the whole staff, everyone who worked in the factory and everything. And people would, the retail manager would say, "Oh, our prices reflect our costs. I'm energized every time I come to work. There's a nice place to work," and it was nice to work there. And at the end of the week, I came up and he said, "We just took on an account from this little herb company, and they make these herb teas." And he said, "If we were to cancel that account and go into competition with them, it would probably put them right out of business." He said, "When you're a giant like Erewhon, you have to be very careful of every little step you take because you might crush somebody. So I think we probably don't want to do that now. If you want to stay work here, you can." Well, I decided I wouldn't stay and work there. And that little company was called Celestial Seasonings.
Whoa.
And
Yeah, they still are.
They still are.
Very big now.
Isn't that amazing?
That's that little company that they would have put out a business.
Yeah, they were just getting started. It was just some little guy in Colorado, I think. They made that mix. I'm trying to think of his name, but so to me that was kind of an amazing lesson about ethical business. And all of a sudden, and he encouraged me. He said, "Yeah, we know people who do different kinds of projects with us." So I started gathering herbs and teas. And I would go to folk festivals and have a display. And then, but what was nice about it is a lot of times there were folk festivals, and there were festivals of people with traditional music skills and abilities and old timers. And anybody who had anything to say about herbs, I would hear from them. They'd come over and talk to me about what they knew. So in some ways, it was a classical education.
I got the left hind leg of a rabbit. Things are coming my way, yeah. All I got to do is just reach out and grab it. Things are coming my way. Oh me, oh my, I'm so happy all the time. I ain't got nothing for to trouble my mind. Things are coming my way, yeah. I got the left hind leg of a rabbit. Things are coming my way, yeah. All I got to do is just reach out and grab it. Things are coming my way. Oh, me, how good I feel. I come possession of an automobile. I can eat chicken and I don't have to steal. Things are coming my way, yeah. I got the left hind leg of a rabbit. Things are coming my way, yeah. All I got to do is just reach out and grab it. Things are coming my way. Things are coming my, things are coming my, things are coming my way.
It was a classical education.
That was your in. You had the herbs, and of course, as someone who's studying plants and herbal medicine, and you're always learning. Feels like it's endless, you know. Even at the age you are now, you're like, I never knew that about that plant.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So and then being there, people are gonna obviously come and talk to you about plants because you have.
There's all this people want to come and talk, and that really opened up lots of different worlds to me. You know, just various old timers and various gospel singers and.
The folk festivals. Was this all over the country, or was it just in the East?
Well, I guess I didn't go to any folk festivals in the West, but I guess there was just 2 or 3 that I would go to. There was one in New York State, and there was Philadelphia Folk Festival I would go to, and there were some in the Smoky Mountains, and some here in North Carolina. So I could make a few $100 here and there. And then it paid for my travel, and so I could actually afford a van. And so it just allowed me just to study more plants and talk to more people. And
take in all the stories of those places and those plants from different.
And that's what would happen, you know. I ended up talking to these old timers about different kinds of plants or whatever, and ask them about different things. What about possums, you know? Well, I'm possums. And next thing you know, I'd hear more stories. And that's a little how I got into storytelling. Because I'm going to these festivals anyway, and sometimes I would get a little space on stage and tell some stories or talk to somebody.
Like the stories were being told to you, and then you held these stories, and then you have a knack for, like, at least you gained, at the time you must have realized that you had a knack for also retelling them in your own way, you know, like maybe as a way to educate or entertain. You know, or both.
That's the trick.
Make people happy.
We're hooked. There's something in our mind it's hooked to narrative. So I tell you about this plant that is good for you. It's got vitamin C and it's got vitamin A in it. But you know what happened to me one time? I was in the woods, and you feel how you perk up.
When you, what happened?
What happened? You know? And that's kind of any teacher knows that.
Did you have anybody teach you how to tell stories, like, in this time, or you just kind of started to figure it out, or like learn by observing, or like put it together on your own, like, because you're obviously a very good storyteller. I mean, people love to hear them over and over and over, the same ones, even it never gets old.
Right. You know? I always try to not do too many of the same ones over and over, but you're right. Nobody remembers all the details. But I don't think there was any particular teacher. My dad was a good storyteller, more of a joke teller, but he had a good way of being with people. And I think I probably picked up some from him.
Yeah.
And basically most of my stories are just me trying to figure out something. Well, I was in the woods and I saw something. You know what? I found out it was a so-and-so. And then you know what? You know what the Indians say about those? Blah, blah, blah. Well, I talked to this old man. He said blah, 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 blah. And that becomes the basis for a narrative. It's just a journey of discovery.
Tell me, son, did you ever wake up with muskrats on your mind?
Yes.
Muskrat, oh muskrat, what makes your tail so slick? I've been living in the swamp so darn long. Lucky I ain't sick, Lord. Lucky I ain't sick. Groundhog, oh groundhog, what makes your back so brown? I've been digging in the dirt so darn long, making my hole in the ground, Lord, digging my hole in the ground. Rooster, oh rooster, what makes your spurs so hard? I've been scratching in your barnyard all of my life, and Lord, I'm getting tired now. Lord, I'm getting tired. Bullfrog, oh bullfrog, what makes your back so green? I can watch the water all day, and there I'll never be seen, Lord, there I'll never be seen. Chipmunk, oh chipmunk, what makes your cheek so round? I've been gathering those seeds and those nuts. I'm gonna store 'em in my hole in the ground, Lord, store 'em in my hole in the ground. Caterpillar, oh caterpillar, don't you hate to creep and crawl? I'll be flying high one day, so I don't mind at all, Lord, I don't mind at all. Rattlesnake, oh rattlesnake, what makes your teeth so white? I've been laying in the sun so darn long, lucky I don't bite, Lord, lucky I don't bite.
You got it.
You can't forget it after that. I think coming here as soon as we got here, Squirrel was like, "Oh, I read your blog post about the snakes, like that encounter with those baby copperheads." I'm sure he and anyone else there will never forget, because we got it really close. A look at something you don't usually get to see. And
Yeah, this guy rolled over a log, and there was a mama copperhead and 5 babies.
this was at Piedmont Erskills?
Yeah, Piedmont Erskills.
Yeah.
And copperheads don't lay eggs; they give live birth. So I guess she had probably just given birth, and there's this little ball of babies, and there she was curled up beside him, not right next to him, not like she was cuddling them or anything, but it looked like they just had done the job.
So you traveled around to all these folk festivals, selling herbs and trading herbs and hearing stories and like learning about plants. I mean, the traveling life is so interesting. You don't get that like consistency in one place, which obviously you've gotten for decades in this being here, you know, but you get a lot of little tidbits and pieces and parts from all over, and it's easy to kind of start to connect things together. You know, you're like, well, I saw that plant in New York, and I also saw it in Pennsylvania, and I also saw it in this place, and the people here said this thing about it, and people here said this thing about it, and it starts to kind of form this really interesting.
Lots of back burner things.
Yeah.
Things that are just simmer away in the back burner, and if something else will make it hot, you ask the right person, and something will come up.
You don't even realize you remember that experience or that like little bit of information you found from a place and a time and a moment, you know, and then it comes up all of a sudden, and you're like, how did I remember that? Where did that come from, you know? Yeah. And you did that for a while, but you also did a lot of like traveling not in a car, right? You did.
Yeah, before that.
I was like, usually it works like that. You kind of
when you
do
don't have
the
a car,
backpack thing, and then you get sick of that, and you get the car.
Well, I figure out some way to make a living.
Yeah.
Well, selling my herbs at this folk festival, I hear this bold voice. Now here's something I like. I get all my medicine out the woods in the field, and it was Bessie Jones. Bessie Jones was a National Heritage Award winner. She was a national treasure. She was an African American gospel singer. She'd come to folk festivals, and now and then, and she'd come up to my booth and start talking to me about all these different plants. And she would go, what's this? She got in every jar. She wanted to know what everything was. And of course, my names were different than her name. She was from the Georgia Sea Islands. And I asked her if I'd come visit her one time. And I was and I visited her, and I brought a bunch of plants, and we're out in her backyard, and there was a little bull nettle or a horse nettle, Solanum caroliniana. And I said, how about this? You got anything? She says, use it for babies when they're teething. And well, I didn't know anything about babies. I was in my 20s, and you know, but because she said that, it just stuck in my head. You talk about little things stick in your head, stuck in my head. And years later, I was at one of these River Cane rendezvous, and they had Walker Calhoun, an old Cherokee elder, and we were sitting at the edge of this field, and there was some of that Solanum caroliniana, the bull nettle, and I said, Walker, do you know anything about this? He says, yeah, call that bullweed. Oh yeah? I said, well, did you do anything with it? Yes, for the babies when they slobber. Well, I knew a little more about babies by then. I knew that when babies are teething, they drool a lot. And I thought, now hold it. Here's this African American woman from South Georgia talking about the same use that this Native American is talking about. Now it's in the same family as some poisonous plants. It's also in the same family as tomatoes and potatoes, and but also there's nothing edible about this plant. I didn't know about how toxic it is or anything. I said, what about this? How do they do it? He says, put it around their neck. I said, do babies chew on it? He said, no. He said, might be poison. So I thought, oh, how do I figure this one out? So there were some women there too, and there was one Native American woman from the Porch Creek tribe. Her name was Gail Thrower, and I asked her about it. She said, oh yeah, they take a little piece of the root, you put it around the baby's neck on a little necklace, and I said, what do they call it? She said they call it thread sash. Oh, I asked Bessie what they call the plant. And she said they call it tread softly. Tread softly, because if it has thorns on it, you're walking barefoot, you better tread softly around it. And so Gail Thrower, she said, well, I talked to some of the older women, and they call it thread sass. I said, thread like sewing thread? She said, yeah, well, that's what it sounded like to me. She said, sash like sassafras? She said, well, thread sass, that's what they call it. They put it around the baby's neck and make it tight enough so the baby can't get it in their mouth. And they just wear it around their neck. Well, then I started thinking about this. So that family of plants has things like scopolamine in it. And scopolamine is they used to use that for seasickness. And you don't take it internally. You put it on what they call a scope patch. You put it behind your temple or behind your ear, and it's transdermal. So then it dawns on me: could it be that when the baby drools, it moistens the little piece of the root, and a tiny amount of some chemical compound that maybe would inhibit the either work as a narcotic, as a deadener, or maybe would inhibit the drooling. And one of the symptoms of scopolamine poisoning is dryness of the mouth. And so could it be that this is all how this is all connected up? And I was talking to my friend Jimmy Cooley. He's raised in South Carolina. He said, yeah, Daddy always talked about it. He called it tread saft. And tread saft, the old-timey way of saying soft would be saft. And so what Gail heard as thread saft was really tread saft, which was really tread softly, like Bessie Jones called it. So the name was the same, and the usage was the same, but with several different cultures. And so just like, what a journey. And it took years to kind of pull all those pieces together. Just a similar thing to that is that dandelions, the original name came from the French Dandelion. Us Americans, we couldn't speak that well, so we say dandelion instead of Dandelion. Well, you talk to a modern French person and they'll say, no, that's called pissenlit. Pissenlit means piss in the bed. And what that refers to is the diuretic quality of the tea. And I remember talking to someone from Quebec, and I said, now you call that pissenlit? Yeah. Well, I mean, piss in the bed? I never thought of that, but yes, you're right, it does.
It can make you pee in the bed if you drink too much of it.
But they were using the name, but never really made the connection.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's so many connections like that. I mean, of course, we have this like post-colonial culture in the South. We've had colonialism's happened so many hundred more years here So we have a lot of other influences, like the Scot-Irish and African and like all these people from all over, like, and spend a lot of time for all this stuff to kind of morph and for people to do things. And then out west, it's like a whole, it's not been as long.
Fresher indoor.
Yeah, there's a different thing going on, but like you've got a lot of different people, and even in like the coast, eastern shore of Virginia versus where I grew up in Southern Virginia, like the kind of Southern that people speak, like the accent is totally different. The words that people use for things, like where did that come from, Just from one little zone to another. There are like lots of these little micro cultures, and linguistic differences. Yeah. And then the land relationship is intertwined in that, depending, yeah, it's really cool.
Dandelions, they're my favorite flowers in the sunshine or during a shower. Dandelions, they be popping up everywhere. They don't care. Dandelions, they never take a vacation. They always popping up without invitation. Dandelion, there's always enough to share. To the store where the gardeners go to buy me some dandelion seeds. The man behind the counter said, son, don't you know you don't have to plant them, they grow like a weed. Wow! Dandelions, they don't have to be planted. Why does everyone take them for granted? Dandelions, they're special as you and me. Wake up in the morning, you're feeling kinda low. You'll get up and go, it's gone. You need some vitamins, some remedies, some tonic or some tea. Well, look out in your lawn. You got dandelions by the bunch or the bowlful. Eat them all up, they'll make you feel so full. Dandelions, they're special as you and me. Dandelions, they're good for your liver. Eat them all up, they make you jump up and shiver. Dandelions, they'll make a long liver out of you. Dandelions, blow those seeds and make wishes for money, world peace, or lots of sweet kisses. Dandelions, they'll make your wishes come true. They'll make your wishes come true.
So you spent a bunch of time traveling, first by foot, hitchhiking around, and riding trains too.
Did a little bit of that too.
Like, that was fun hearing some of those stories of your album recording.
Yeah.
I've never done it. I have some friends that do it in modern times, which is probably a different experience than it was when you did that. I mean, hitchhiking as well, and...
Yeah, it's not. It used to be always hitchhikers on the road. Now there's hardly ever see anybody.
Yeah. I feel like out in California, it's still like kind of more, I don't know, it's common. Or like if you're near the Appalachian Trail or like the Pacific Crest Trail or something.
Trying to get back to...
Yeah. Or the 101 in California and marijuana growing world, like there's so many people like hitchhiking and it's just like, oh, whatever, the cops are not going to say anything. But here in the South or in the East, I definitely don't see it so much. But back then it was like it was fine, you know. Was it because it was less dangerous, or maybe socially it was more acceptable, or?
I'm not sure. I was thinking that the world is being more desperate now than it was then. You know, it's sort of interesting. It was still sort of semi illegal in the States. At that same particular time when I hitchhiked out west, I went and up into Canada and went to hitchhike back through Canada. In Canada, they said, our young people are on the road. We need to provide for them. So they had like a hostel situation where you could stay in hostels, and they even feed you free if you signed something that said that you were getting some benefit. But because of that, there was like you come to a highway interchange and it'd be like 20 people standing there hitchhiking, and it was like the whole Canadian youth were all on the road, and you had to wait in line to get a ride. That's sort of why one of the reasons I ended up on a train going back east across through Canada, because you just in the prairies of Canada it was hard to get a ride especially when there's 20 more people ahead of you.
Wow, I did not know that. They're like, great, free food.
I got back into the States and came back to the States. It worked out.
Mm-hmm. But then in the States, there probably wasn't that same attitude. Feed the hitchhikers.
And it was illegal in certain places, and you had to be the right place along a highway interchange. You couldn't just stand on the highway, which makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, some places it can be dangerous, like interstates. Yeah. I've only done it a little bit, but as a woman, femme person in this culture, it's always been a little nerve-wracking.
Yeah, I think it's a whole nother level. And again, being a college-educated white guy, I had so many privileges that that wouldn't be available to other people.
Mm-hmm. But some of those travels, I think I was listening to one of the stories. You were riding with these two guys. One of them's from Georgia, and one was from somewhere else. I don't know. I guess you meet these people, and you ask the right questions. You start to really unravel this whole other world.
Right.
I thought that was fascinating. That story.
Right. So the Appalachian diaspora, where so many people from the Appalachians went north for work, and these guys were drinking, and they were working in New Jersey, and they were just dreaming about home, and that was kind of what. Next thing you know, they started. Well, we'll go home. We'll take you with us.
Let's just go. You start asking them enough questions to be nostalgic back home, and then they were like, "Let's just go home." And then they turn around, I think, right?
Right. They realize
I guess we should go back. Yeah. Wow.
It really happened. There's definitely highways that went to Akron, Ohio, went to New Jersey, went to different parts of Cincinnati, where basically people from the mountains just looking for work went north.
Mm-hmm. And then maybe never came back.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, way down south, where I was born, we raised some greasy greens and corn, sweet potatoes and black-eyed peas, green tomato mama now pecan trees. They sure are good. I just eat them all if I could. It's soft and easy, good and greasy. How I love those. I'm a Mississippi man, a New Orleans, a crazy about them greasy greens. If I don't get them 3 times a day, I'll get mad, I'll just walk away. They sure are good. I just eat them all if I could. It's soft and easy, good and greasy. How I love those. Well, honey, you can cook lima beans, or you can cook the sugar I never seen. But when you fix up your table for me, don't cook nothing but them greasy greens. They sure are good. I just eat them all if I could. It's soft and easy, good and greasy. How I love those. Now, honey, there's some greens up on your shelf. You must be saving them for somebody else. I hear some greens falling in that pot. How much greasy greens have you got? They sure are good. I'd eat 'em all if I could. They're soft and easy, good and greasy. How I love those. Now, honey, I don't care what your mama don't allow. I want some good greens anyhow. I'll just eat 'em, honey, and I'll be gone. You never know we slip them on. They sure are good. I just eat 'em all if I could. They're soft and easy, good and greasy. How I love those. Well, honey, that meat must have been fat to make them greens so greasy like that. Don't cook nothing but naturally. How I love them greasy greens. They sure are good. Smell them all around the neighborhood. They're soft and easy, good and greasy. How I love those. Can't get enough of them. Makes your lips smack a week after you eat them. You can leave your jelly roll home, honey. Give me some more of them.
So after this period of time traveling, what made you decide to land in West? I mean, you said it in the beginning of the conversation a little bit of like the diversity here, but like what had you land here and be like, I'm gonna stay here? Or maybe you didn't decide right away. But
Well, I mean, I was still traveling and still doing that kind of stuff in the summer, and then actually I met this elderly herb guy. He said, "Why don't you just come stay in that old cabin of mine, and we can go to the woods whenever we want to then." And that was just too good to pass up, and I just did.
in this area?
Right, just north of Asheville, up in Burnsville area.
Oh, cool, Burnsville.
And so I ended up kind of staying in that area, made friends with a couple other folks, and ended up building a little house up there. And Baron and Karen live there now.
Oh, in that house?
Isn't that funny?
Wait, that's that house that you built?
Yeah, I was probably the best carpenter in the whole area, the most innovative person lives in the house that I built.
Wow.
And I didn't know how to build a house. I just went to a carpenter, kept saying, I got the roof, I got the floor done, what do I do next? You got to do the walls. How do I do that? And he'd tell me, and I'd go try to do it.
Figured it out as you went?
Yeah, and it looks like that, you know. It works. They're still living there.
Wow, I did not know that. I thought he had built that maybe or something, but that's cool. So that was the cabin that you lived in. You were like in your late 20s or early 30s or something at that point.
Yeah.
And you stuck around and you started to learn stuff more specifically about plants and stories of this area.
Right. I just hung with this my mentor. His name was Theron Edwards.
Theron Edwards?
Yeah. And he made a lot of different kinds of medicines and stuff, and just knew a lot of plants and knew birds, knew things, you know, just was born and raised here, and I think was a product of Appalachian inbreeding, and so he never had kids on his own. So I think it kind of left him a little more primitive than many people, because kids are the ultimate modernizer. So like he'd come over to my house and say, call Daisy down there, tell her I'll be down there later on tomorrow. And I said, well, go ahead, use the phone. I can't talk on that thing.
Sounds like my dad.
So you know what we're talking about.
He's like, I need to buy this one thing online. He doesn't know how to use a computer. Like, do it for me.
Right.
So you had to do that for him sometimes.
Well, that was just the telephone. It was before computers.
Oh yeah.
You know.
That's a whole.
But he was just full of lots of lore, and we had good times.
A lot of the stories that you tell, a lot of them were passed to you or you heard. Did you also, and some of these are your own experiences, too,
Yeah,
mixed in. Some of them are so surreal and almost supernatural, and like sometimes you're like, was that real or not? You know, which I think is part of that imaginatory, like catching people, engrossing them in the story to really like pay attention. You know, and I guess I'm curious, like how much of your stories are like things that you created, and how much of them are like ones that you heard and you're passing on.
I guess it sort of depends. Pay attention, be astonished, tell about it.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's what I do. You know, it's just like, I can't believe this happened to me. What happened? I saw this happen. What's that all about? And explaining it. And so that's, to me, that's a lot of what it's about.
You still do a lot of wandering in the woods and like finding things, you know, and like learning through that.
Right.
And I'm just going on a gander with you. It's like always an adventure. You never know where you're gonna find, what story will come out. You know.
You never know. You know, just you keep it in mind. You know, like what's tellable, what's recountable.
Mhm. No, I was here in this. I guess it was June, maybe. We found a bunch of chanterelles here on your land. I remember we weren't even. Well, were we looking for I think we were just like, let's go on a walk, and all of a sudden we're like, oh my god, chanterelles. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the blessing about, you know, but especially about knowing what's out there, what the potential is. Then you can take advantage of it. You know.
Mm-hmm.
There ain't no bugs on me. There ain't no bugs on me. There might be bugs on some of you mugs, but there ain't no bugs on me. Well, the June bug comes in the month of June, and the lightning bugs in May. The bed bugs come just any old time, but they ain't gonna stay. The chigger, he crawls here. The chigger, he crawls there. Where that chigger stops, I ain't gonna tell you where. There was a little chigger and it wasn't any bigger than the wee small head of a pin. But the bump that he raised, well, it itched like the blazes, and that's where the rub comes in. There ain't no red bugs on me. There ain't no red bugs on me. There might be red bugs on some of you mugs, but there ain't no red bugs on me. Little fleas have smaller fleas upon their backs to bite them. Those smaller fleas have smaller fleas, so on ad infinitum. Ain't no fleas on me. There ain't no fleas on me. There might be fleas behind your knees, but there ain't no fleas on me. There ain't no crawdads on me. There's no crawdads on me. There might be crawdads on some of you lads, but there ain't no crawdads on me. Mosquito, she flies high. Mosquito, she flies low. That mosquito lands on me. She ain't gonna fly no more. There was a little skeeter and she wasn't any bigger than a wee small head of a pin. But the bump that she raised, well, it's like a blaze, and that's where the rub comes in. There ain't no bugs on me. There ain't no bugs on me. There might be bugs on some of you mugs, but there ain't no bugs on me. There ain't no fleas on me. There ain't no jiggers on me. There ain't no crawdads on me. There ain't no skeeters on me.
It's like there's the mythic story, the hero's journey, which Joseph Campbell talk about, and basically saying that there's only one story, and it's basically a journey that the hero, the principal person in the story takes. And whether we're talking about Harry Potter, Jesus, or Mother Teresa, whoever it is, it's all basically the same story. They go on a journey and they come back, and or they did or don't come back, or whatever. And so it's kind of like we go out and we're on a quest. We're looking, the old tales where Jack was out seeking his fortune. That's what we're doing. We go in the woods. We're out there seeking our fortune. We're looking for something, looking for some beauty, looking for some incident, looking for something to eat, looking for, you know. And so that's kind of how we go throughout life. Whether we're going to the store to get a quart of milk, whether we're going on
A road trip.
a road trip or a space journey or whatever. Basically, that's what we do. We're all on that same journey. We're searching.
I wanted to chime in here and note that the next short story that Doug tells in song is a part of a bigger series of stories from Doug's album of ginseng, golden apples, and rainbow fish. And if you want to know about the cow, fish, and who Atlanta is, listen to the whole album. It's too long to feature here in entirety on the podcast. But Doug brought up the song and the stories, so I thought I'd feature one of the stories about ginseng and also some song that goes with it. If you want to hear what this is about more in depth, I highly recommend going and listening to that whole album on his Bandcamp page.
And so as I was driving home, I thought, well, I want to see if I can get some ginseng. I'd really wanted to go on a ginseng hunt. The road went through the national forest, and as I went through the national forest, I pulled over and I went on up into the woods and just trying to look on those rich north slopes, see if I could find a little bit of ginseng. And sure enough, I came on some of those ferns. There were some of those Botrychium ferns, the sang sign, and mountain people call them a sang pointer or a sang sign. And sure enough, there's a couple of those ferns, and sure enough, I came to a little patch of ginseng. Nowadays, I don't really hardly ever gather the ginseng roots. I just gather the tops. Tops have a lot of the same medicinal value, and that way it also keeps other people from finding it, other ginseng hunters, because ginseng still is actually getting $1,000 a pound. And so you can see that would really put a pressure on a small population of a somewhat rare plant. So I would just take the leaves mostly, so I had a big bundle of ginseng leaves, and I was walking down. I see something white on this log, and I looked. And it was a great big cluster of oyster mushrooms. Oyster mushrooms are one of the easiest recognized mushrooms, and I thought, oh, mushrooms, great. And you think about mushrooms, we talk about this fungal connection, the wood wide web, they call it, and think about those little spores. Take a deep breath. You're probably breathing in mushroom spores. They're in the air. They get up. They go in the jet stream sometimes. And think about this mushroom. The spores that produce mushroom could have gone all the way around the world several times before they landed here on this particular log. It was in the right stage of rot. They could grow into the wood, and the mycelium would grow, and the moisture had gotten just right, so they fruited. And the old thing about the largest living thing. The biologists would say, it's the blue whale. Blue whale, and somebody else says, well, it's not really a blue whale. The largest living thing really is a sequoia tree, because a sequoia tree is much bigger than a blue whale, and with all its leaves and roots. And someone else said, no, it's not a blue whale, it's an aspen tree. An aspen tree? Aspen trees, they're only about this big around, even a big one. How can an aspen tree be the biggest tree? Well, what happens? It puts out a root sprout, and puts out another tree, and that makes another tree, and that makes another tree, and that makes another tree, and soon you end up with a whole patch of woods that's all the same tree, one clone. Oh, it's sort of amazing. And then someone says, no, it's a mushroom. Mushroom? How can a mushroom be the largest thing? Well, they're out west there, and they started collecting all these armillaria mushrooms in this big natural area. And they started collecting them from all parts of this whole reserve. And they brought them back to the lab. Yep, they're all the same species. Then they did genetic testing on them and found out not only were they the same species, they were the same mushroom. Covered 3 square miles. They realized the largest living thing might really be a mushroom. Whoa! To me, your friends will call you up and say, "Hey, the morels are up, or the chanterelles are up. Why don't you get out and see if you can find any?" We could all be out in the woods and all picking the same mushroom and putting it in our basket. Whoa! What a giveaway, Yeah. Apples, fools, fish of freedom, no matter what you seek. We're all looking for our fortune down the road or in the creek. We're all on that same journey, we're pulling that same plow. Apples, fools, fish of freedom, trying to sell that cow. Sometimes the gold you're looking for is hanging on a limb. Sometimes the fool turns out to be you instead of him. That journey that you're seeking is swimming in a stream, and that freedom that you're chasing just might be your dream. Apples, fools, fish of freedom, no matter what you seek. We're all looking for our fortune down the road or in the creek. We're all on that same journey, we're pulling that same plow. Apples, fools, fish of freedom, we're just trying to sell that cow. Atlanta was a running girl, wild and chaste and free. She said, you got to be a mover if you're gonna marry me. Some folks are fools for love and some are fools for freedom. Sometimes you get to fool a fish and then you get to eat him. Apples, fools, fish of freedom, no matter what you seek. We're all looking for our fortune down the road or in the creek. We're all on that same journey, we're pulling that same plow. Apples, fools, fish of freedom, we're just trying to sell that cow. Last time, apples, fools, fish of freedom, no matter what you seek. We're all looking for our fortune down the road or in the creek. We're all on that same journey, we're pulling that same plow. Apples, fools, fish of freedom, just trying to sell that cow. Apples, fools, fish of freedom, we're just trying to sell that cow. Oh, thank you all. Thank you. Keith.
I can remember finally getting out to California after someone across the country. This guy picks me up, and a nice guy said, "That's great. You're doing this while you're young. Well, you do this while you can." And I think, heck, man, I'm gonna be able to do this as long as I want to forever. And well, he was so right, because I don't want to go hitchhiking now. I know where I want to go if I want to go somewhere. I'm much more focused. I was unfocused then. I was looking for America, looking for adventure, looking for wisdom and meaning.
It just changes shape. Like you said, now the journeys are like, going in the woods. But I mean, you still get out there and go on adventures. I mean, you go on the canoe trips with the young 25-year-olds, and like
whatever I can.
It just looks different, like it's more like little spurts or like intermingling it with the grounded life versus it being all the time. But I think that's cool that you're still like I'm not too old to go on a canoe trip with young folks.
Yeah, thank goodness they let me come,
Oh, they wouldn't say no. I mean, I don't know.
Depends on how rough the water was.
Yeah, totally. I was thinking a lot about listening to your stories and having listened to a lot of stories in the West that wondering, like you tell a lot of stories that have to do with possums and groundhogs, and these are animals that lots of people have experiences with here in the South. And out West there's a lot of stories about coyotes. I mean, coyotes sort of this archetype that people use to tell stories, lessons, teaching, and you tell some stories about coyotes. But I find it fascinating that the possum is such a central critter.
The possum, it's so accessible. It's been so important to so many people, and it's sort of like you don't even have to have a gun. There's a dog that can bark and chase the possum up the tree and shake him out of the tree. So it was so important to so many people. There's so much lore. So for years I remember actually learning some possum poems, learning some stories about possums, and before one ever actually, next thing you know, one showed up in my life, and I was out listening to bird calls one spring in May up in Yancey County. I was listening and hearing all these twerps and toodles, and hear this kind of sound distressful with a little bitty possum.
Oh.
Little pink eyes, little pink toes, little pink nose, little pink ears, little shoe button eyes, and a nasty little possum grin. Like, poor little thing, what are we going to do? It fell off Mama's back. I put her on my head, and there she stayed for a couple of weeks. Of course, you might wonder, like, what happened when she has to. I learned very quickly that when she wanted to use nature's call, when she wanted to defecate or urinate, she would insist on coming down. I let her down anytime I could. It's amazing how fast a primitive possum can toilet train a human.
You don't want to get peed on.
And I kept her for about a year.
Wow.
And she was tame and
and then one day wasn't.
One day, didn't even leave a note under the pillow. These relationships so hard to keep together. And one day she was gone.
And never saw her again.
Walked away. Didn't run away. Walked away.
Yeah.
She didn't run very much.
Wow, what a cool experience. The possums are they're cute when they're babies. When they get to be adult, they're a little gnarly, and you think they're likely not gonna hurt you or anything, but they just look so.
They got more teeth than any fur-bearing animal.
Oh, really?
And they show that teeth. That's what the possum, grinning like a possum. You heard that expression, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there she was, grinning like a possum.
Yeah, I know you'll go out to your compost pile at midnight to try to dump something, and there he is in there, eating some of your leftovers, and he's just hey, hissing at you, leave me be in here.
Right.
But they're good to have around, right, for so many reasons.
Well, they're immune to copperhead and pit viper venom. And in some areas, that's their primary food. They just eat copperheads. So if you like copperheads in your yard, kill all your possums.
Mm-hmm.
And supposedly they eat ticks too, and supposedly that's some new information on that.
I've been hearing that too, which is in some places really a good thing to keep at bay.
Yeah. Remember one time my son was about 5 years old, 4 or 5 years old, and we were coming back over the Painter Gap over here, and a possum crossed the road, and I realized he hadn't seen a possum since he'd been a little boy. So I quick pulled the car over, put an emergency brake on, ran out. It was going up the hill, and grabbed it by the tail, and brought it back. And my wife, Yana says, well, look, there's that Audubon group coming tomorrow. Why don't you save it for them? Well, here we had this possum, and we had the pickup truck with the cap off. Not exactly you can put a wild possum in your lap. I thought, how are we going to get this possum home? so Yana said, I'll hold it.
Oh,
so she held it by the tail out the window.
Oh
we drove home, the possum waving its feet like it's swimming, the whole way home. And then I put it in a big old barrel and put some hay in the bottom of the barrel, put some water, put some sweet potatoes and persimmons we had, and I left him in there. Next morning, the whole group they're coming down, and they've been riding in their bus for a few hours, and they come over, and I said, well, we can do different projects here, and actually, let me show you what I got here. I got here, right here in this barrel, I got the most unusual creature in the continent. It's got more teeth than any fur-bearing animal. It's got feet like a monkey, tail like a cat, tail like a rat, face like a pig, whiskers like a cat. You can guess all day. Can you guess that? And they're all sitting there kind of slack-jawed wondering, what the heck have I got in this barrel? One goes, a possum? I said, yep, you're right. I went and pulled the possum out. Well, they were astounded that it was alive. We looked at the possum, and it has opposable thumbs on the hind feet. We talked about how humanity has used their opposable thumbs to build great civilizations. Well, possums have been used their feet just to hang on. They've been hanging on since the time of the dinosaurs. So we talked about that, and I said, now, how many of you all ever been on a possum hunt? Well, they all kind of stood there, Well, I thought maybe you all are here studying environmental education. Maybe we should all go on a possum hunt. So let's take the possum out in the woods. We'll let him go, and when he starts to run off, you all chase him and catch him.
Yeah.
And I think, they're all kind of standing there looking. So we marched into the woods and put the possum down. The possum just kind of rolls over and goes.
They get a little slow and funny sometimes when they're scared.
Yeah, right. It wouldn't. I thought, how am I gonna have a possum on this? Possum won't run.
They're all like, that was easy.
Then the possum laid a big old orange turd And it started to run. And I said, come on, y'all. There's the possum. He's getting away. You got to chase him. They all stood there. I said, come on. Somebody said, one of the guys finally goes over. He runs over, tries to catch the possum. The possum turns around and goes, ah. And they said, he's dancing around this possum. The possum's turning around every time he come around. The possum was turning around. And my little boy just laughing. It was the funniest thing in the world. The possum going, ah. Finally, he grabbed the possum, picked it up, and the possum played possum. Just went stiff and acted like it was dead. And we all held the possum up. They passed it around. They all took pictures.
Because he was playing dead.
He was playing dead. It was just stiff as could be.
He was so scared.
So I propped him up and supposedly, it's not even a matter of scared, but supposedly they just blow a fuse. And I propped it up in a tree so the dog couldn't get it. Went back a little later, it was gone.
We came to after a little bit.
We had to have a little discussion with the group, though. Were we abusing this animal?
Yeah.
And I said, well, the animal, first of all, you've seen how possums, when they cross the road, what a hard time they have. And so we got this possum after it crossed the road, fed it a good meal. It did what possums do, played possum. Now it's running free. So I think the possum actually got a benefit from the whole experience.
Got to eat a bunch of persimmons.
Got a good feed,
Yeah.
So anyhow, so that's one little possum story.
They show up here at your place a lot and
Occasionally.
come and look in the window and
Yeah, well, usually get in the grapevine or get in the fig tree.
eat
The
the
dogs,
figs.
the dogs will get going on them.
Mm-hmm.
I usually take them down the road, or we had some of my Mexican friends came one time. The dogs treated possum, and oh, tlacuache, que bueno. And next thing you know, we had possum tamales.
Oh yeah.
And they were so excited about that. They told about the 1 or 2 times they'd ever had possum before, and they were so excited about it.
I don't think I've eaten possum but a couple times. I mean, it's one of those things in some places people used to eat it all the time, and
What traditionally people would do, just because possums are big carrion feeders, people always tell the story about kicking an old dead cow carcass and outrun 2 possums.
because they're in there getting
So
it.
people would keep them feed them on cornbread and sweet milk for a couple of weeks and kind of clean them out, and they would just butcher them and cook them.
Wow. What have you-
Possum meat is good and sweet. I always finds it good to eat. My dog tree, I went to see a great big possum in that tree. I reached up, took him in, that old possum, he began to grin. The way I cooked that possum off, I first laid him in the frost. The way I cooked that possum salad was first parboiled, then baked him brown. Put sweet taters in the pan, makes the finest eating in all the land.
Oh, that's awesome. Would it is considered like food that poor people ate, or was it not really even?
Sure. The guy who Frank Basil Clark, he started the Possum Growers and Breeders Association in Alabama. He said when he's seen 3 or 4 people, 3 or 4 families chasing the same possum, times was tough.
Oh yeah.
That's what he used to say.
Wow.
Of course, because they were accessible, and because they were, you can just catch them. You just run down and catch them, grab them up. Climb up a tree, pull them out of the tree.
And they don't have any hair on their tails.
Not much.
Not much. Yeah, maybe a little fuzz. And wonder if they get colds. The tail. I wonder about these things.
The possum, because of human civilization, the possum has extended its range. It used to be just in the deep south. Now it can be found all the way up into, maybe even into New England. And I've been in
That's his recent thing.
in
Like
recent decade, recent 100 years or so.
Oh wow.
Garbage cans, compost piles have really done dog food dishes on the porch. They've done possums a real favor. And when I've been up even in the high country in Yancey County, I've caught a possum in the wintertime, and its ears were a little bit frostbitten, and the tip of its tail was frostbitten. So they really can, because there's extra food now, they can live in places where they really are not climatically adapted.
Raccoon and a possum, raccoon and a possum, raccoon and a possum up in a holler log. Raccoon says to the possum, raccoon says to the possum, raccoon says to the possum, now beware of that barking dog. Possum up in a cinnamon tree, turtle on the ground. Turtle says to the possum, sir, please shake them cinnamons down. Raccoon and a possum racking across the prairie. Raccoon says to the possum, now do you want to marry? That possum is a cunning thing. He travels in the dark. He never thinks to curl his tail till he hears old Rover bark. Now you're as lovely as a rose, as sweet as any blossom. If you want to get your finger bit, just poke it at a possum. Rabbit up a gum stump, cooney in the holler, possum up a cinnamon tree, as fat as he can waller. Raccoon has a bushy tail, possum's tail is bare. Rabbit ain't got no tail at all, just a little bitty bunch of hair.
Yeah, I feel like I was asking people what their favorite stories are of yours, and a lot of people really love your possum stories and your snake stories.
Some people relate to, everyone's got a snake story.
There's one you tell about the snake, some snake that ate a fake egg. Although somebody told me it was a plastic egg, someone else told me it was a wooden egg. I can't remember because I've heard you tell it a few times. And then you were concerned and you tried to get it out of the snake. And
So we had need a nest egg. The chickens don't lay their eggs just anywhere. I mean, they'll lay them just anywhere. You want them to lay the eggs where you want them to lay them. So you leave one egg in the nest. They're very visual, and they want to make a clutch. So they see one egg and they go, "Puck, puck, puck, come on, girls, that's where we lay our eggs." And so you leave that one egg in the nest. That's called your nest egg. Nowadays when people talk about nest eggs, they talk about money in the bank, right? In the old days, that was the only kind of the interest you got was leaving one egg in the nest, and that make the chicken. But you have to mark that one unless it's a fake egg. Mm-hmm. So we had a plastic egg, and we put that in the nest box. Worked great. It felt like an egg to those chickens. It looked like an egg to them. Within a week, they were all laying their eggs in the nest box. Well, after a while, though, we noticed the egg disappeared, and we couldn't find it.
This was here?
Yeah. A couple weeks later, we had these boards out in the garden. It was a way of monitoring for copperheads. You leave a board out in the garden and you check it every now and then. It's a snake board. Mm-hmm. And snakes love a nice dark brown. And there's this snake, had a lump in its belly. The lump looked kind of awfully round. Oh no. There's more to the story, but
yeah.
What am I going to do? The snake, I felt it. It felt just like a plastic egg. I thought, I don't want to do surgery and cut that snake open. I got to figure some way to get that snake out, get that egg out of there. We took it up. We measured the snake. The snake was 6 feet long. The egg was 32 inches down the snake. Well, got it down that far. Maybe I could just squeeze it back up. So I started squeezing it, putting the pressure on it, gently but firmly. And we squeezed. John was trying to hold the snake, and we squeezed and got to move like a half an inch, and then another half an inch, then another inch by inch by inch by inch. You heard this part.
Yeah.
That's your part.
Yeah.
And eventually the snake, we got it out. Eventually the snake's own peristalsis started carrying the egg on its own once it got started. Eventually it burped up the egg, and it's, and that snake, it's hard to read the expression on a snake, but
It's probably relieved.
And I kept it overnight. Or maybe give it a dish of water. It drank almost that whole dish of water. And then I just left it there. The next morning I came and looked. It looked like he was doing fine. Maybe I wish I could feed it something, because but we want snakes around because they eat the mice and the rats. And I thought, well, if he's hungry, maybe he'll eat more mice or rats. But then I hear it down at the chicken coop. I hear buck, 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 buck. Sounded like a hen that just laid an egg. you know, they make a big fuss when they lay an egg, and when you think about it, you can kind of understand why. And thought, I wonder how that snake would relate to an egg now. So I went running down there, and there was that proud hen, and there was that egg, still warm. That's a fresh egg. I took it back, put it in front of that snake. That snake started little tongue started coming out. Next thing you know, it started swallowing that egg. And next thing you know, we watched that egg move down that snake, inch by inch by inch by inch. Got into that snake about 9 inches, 8 or 9 inches, and then it stopped. I thought, maybe it's having second thoughts about this.
Maybe it's like, is this a plastic one? I'm not sure.
Yeah, right. But I don't want to. Then it curled its body into a right angle with that egg right in the corner. And they heard a sound. It sounded like this. The egg collapsed right there. Had a place where it could break the egg. Another few minutes, you couldn't even tell a snake had eaten. And it's hard to read the expression on a snake. But it seemed like that snake was saying, ah, that's the way an egg's supposed to be. That's the true story of the snake and the egg. And that snake showed up for like 6 years.
The same one.
Same snake. Had one little spot behind its eye we could tell. A couple of times it showed up right before I even had a storytelling program. I got to bring the snake, tell that story.
This is the actual snake.
And here's the snake. Whoa! Here's the egg. Whoa! Here's the snake. Whoa! And I held up an egg. It would swallow the egg right in front of the crowd.
Really?
Yeah.
So you'd actually feed that same snake. It knew that you would give him an egg, so he came back.
Either that, yeah, or it just knew that's where the eggs were. It's hard to know what they really knew.
Yeah.
You know, it seemed like big snakes don't seem to be as defensive as young snakes. Young snakes may be more snappy. Mm-hmm. Big snakes are often mellow. And a few different times. I think I even did it for the Green River Preserve when Fuzz was there as a student, as a young. And a couple times I even did it for it was a little festival, and I had like a 10 o'clock show. I did a 10 o'clock show. I did it for the 3 o'clock show. Swallowed eggs both times. In front of an audience, it was like, man, this is the best. You know, I started to worry about his cholesterol count, you know.
Yeah. He's full for days after that. Yeah. Eventually he stopped coming around.
Yeah, I think went where good snakes go, but his grandkids and his kids show up regularly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Looking for eggs.
Looking for eggs.
Yeah.
Oh. I could tell you. So we ended up letting our chickens free range, and then we have a little shed out there with square bales of hay, and I pulled the square bales apart so there's like a little couple cubbies in there where they could lay their eggs. Mm-hmm. And they like to do that. That worked great, so the chickens could run free all day. We still lock off at night to keep the coons and the possums away. Mm-hmm. And but you have to check during the summertime just to make sure the snakes aren't there when you hear the chickens laying eggs. So I was there checking one time, and I'm like, oh, darn it. Usually it's like you see a snake and it's got the egg down and you're supposed to be eating voles and mice and rats, not eggs. Give me that egg. That's my egg. Take the snake out. We put it in the garden, put it down a vole hole, and it like disappears. You know, a 5-foot snake disappears into some network under the ground. And well, I come out there one day, and there's this not very big snake, and she is working so hard trying to swallow this egg. And she's just trying, she's just working hard. You can see it just barely moving down her throat. She's stretched to her maximum. She's working hard as can be. I think, oh, all right, you can have this egg, you can swallow it, but I'm waiting here, and as soon as you're through, I'm taking you out to the garden. I'm not gonna let you eat any more eggs. So I'm kind of waiting, you know, and she's trying to get this egg down her throat. And out of the back of the hay bales comes another black rat snake, same kind of snake, bigger than her. And next thing you know, he starts following her every contour of her body. And next thing you know, he makes this sort of vibration with his belly all over her back. And next thing you know, their two cloacas, that multi-purpose opening at the base of their tails, are locked together. And time stood still as they rolled together there in the hay.
Rolling in the hay.
Meanwhile, she's still trying to swallow that egg. And finally, I guess he'd done what he'd come to do, if you know what I mean. He gave her a few fond flickers of his tongue. And next thing you know, he kind of took off out of the back of the hay bale. Meanwhile, she finally working on this egg. She finally gets it down there, and she turns her body at the right angle, and I hear a crunch. She swallowed that egg, and she looked up, and you know, it's hard to read. Remember, what gave her more satisfaction, you know.
My old hand's a good old hand, lays her eggs for the railroad men. Sometimes a one, sometimes a two, sometimes enough for the whole doomed crew. Cluck old hen, cluck and sing, ain't laid an egg since way last spring. Cluck old hen, cluck and squall, ain't laid an egg since way last fall. My old hen, she won't do. She lays eggs and taters too. First time she cackling a lot. Next time she cackle in the pot. Had a little hand, she had a wooden foot. Laid her eggs by the mulberry brook. Best little hen I had around the farm. Another drink of cider wouldn't do me any harm. Lays her eggs for the railroad men. Sometimes a one, sometimes a two, sometimes a three, sometimes a four, sometimes a five, sometimes a six, sometimes a seven, sometimes a eight, sometimes a nine, sometimes a 10, and that's enough for the railroad men.
Women, you have so many.
Well, we live in stories. You know, what'd you do today? Well, I went and got up, and you beginning a narrative.
Mm-hmm.
So we're all full of stories.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the ones I tell aren't always recorded.
Yeah. Yeah, and some of the ones that you recorded are maybe ones you don't tell that much, you know. And some of them are.
Yeah, it depends.
Depends, yeah. There's somebody on Facebook, oh, if I can remember the name, oh, maybe I shouldn't even say because I can't remember. They said that they've never heard you tell a story again. It was in like Tennessee at a storytelling festival. Something about the reason why lawns became popular or some story.
Oh, yeah.
And they were like, I love that story. And I'm like, I've never heard anything, a story about lawns being, I don't know if you remember, but.
Yeah, I mean, I have a little lawn piece, I was talking about the dilemma of wanting to have natural land and wanting to have some land you can walk on and some land you don't have to worry about where the snakes are.
Mm-hmm.
And so that dilemma, and where did lawns come from? And I read an anthropology book that talked about the anthropology of the American lawn, the undivided lawn. It's an American thing where you sometimes in a suburban environment you can tell when one lawn starts and the other one ends, and it's the United Front, the United Estates of America. Estates,
yeah.
And then could it be that it's ancient time where it's left over from our time in Africa, where the only time you were safe was when you could see all around you and you could hide behind bushes and thorns. So we have shrubbery around our houses and we have big open lawns. And maybe it comes from aristocratic days where anyone who had that much land and didn't use it for producing food has to obviously be filthy rich. So it's a way of determining status. And then...
You don't have much of a lawn here, it seems like.
Well, it's amazing how much you do have to mow, it seems like, just to maintain what we got.
The paths and around the garden, and even if you don't try to have a lawn in this part of the country, grass grows wherever something else isn't growing, you know?
Right, and it's really important to know where you're putting your feet in the summertime around here, just because there are copperheads. And so you really kind of need to have at least some clear space where you know where you're walking.
There is function to keeping things cut down, you know, like. And
then realizing that people have been growing grass for a long time since they discovered grain, because of course grain is in the grass family, right? And then there's that whole impersonalization of the spirit of the grain, John Barleycorn. And one of the oldest songs in the English language is John Barleycorn.
Oh, really?
And it talks about the harvest. It talked about how you take the seed and you plant it in the ground, you bury it like it's dead, it comes back to life, then grows a long beard when it's ripe, and you cut it down, and then to winnow it, or to dehusk it, you have to beat it. And then you have to grind it to make the flour, or ferment it to make the beer. John Barleycorn must die, John Barleycorn must die. These three men made a solemn vow, John Barleycorn must die. They plowed, they sowed, they harrowed him in, threw clouds upon his head. These three men made a solemn vow, John Barleycorn was dead. They let him lie for a very long time, and the rain from heaven did fall. Little Sir John sprung up his head, and so amazed them all. They let him stand till midsummer, till he grew both pale and wan. Little Sir John grew a long sharp beard, and so became a man. They hired men with size so sharp to cut him at the knee. They rolled him, tied him about the waist, they used him barbarously. They hired men with sharp pitchforks to pierce him to the heart. They tied him to a cart. They wheeled him around and around that field till they came into a barn. There they made a solemn vow of poor John Barleycorn. John Barleycorn must die, John Barleycorn must die. These three men made a solemn vow, John Barleycorn must die. They hired men with crab-tree sticks to beat him skin from bones. The miller, he treated him worse than that, for he ground him between two stones. Of all they did to him, this was the worst of all. A big man poured him down his throat, and he pissed him against the wall. John Barleycorn must die, John Barleycorn must die. These three men made a solemn vow, John Barleycorn must die. They worked their will on Barleycorn, but he lives to tell the tale. Now they pour him out of an old brown jug, and they call him home-brewed ale. So here's to Sir John and a nut-brown loaf, and a good strong ale in a glass. Little Sir John, still here today, proved the stronger man at last. For the huntsman, he must hunt the fox, loudly blow his horn. John Barleycorn must die, John Barleycorn must die. These three men made a solemn vow, John Barleycorn must die. Long live John Barleycorn, and long live us all.
You would hear people sing while drinking beer made out of barley.
I mean, there you go. There you go. You know, but just talking about that life spirit in the grain, how it transformed.
I wanted to throw in here next, after the John Barleycorn song, a story that Doug retells called The Ballad of the Night Charlie Tended Weir, because I just love the way he tells this story, and it's about a serpent, and it's really fun. It's from his album Everybody's Fishin', and you can also find that on his Bandcamp. Enjoy.
Charlie had a herring wire down to Bailey's Bight. He got up 'twas the middle of the night. It was late October, midnight black as tar. Nothing out the window but a big cold star. House like a cemetery, kitchen fire dead. I'm a damn good mind, says Charlie, to go on back to bed. A man who runs a herring wire, even on the side, is nothing but a slave to the golden tide. A man feels meager, and a man feels old in that pitch-black midnight, lonesome and cold, chills in his stomach like 40,000 mice, the very buttons on his pants, little lumps of ice. Times he gets to feeling that it's no damn use. So Charlie poured a pitcherful in his orange juice, and he felt a little better than he had before, so he had another pitcherful just to last him to the shore. Now down by them beach rocks underneath a tree, Charlie saw something he thought he'd never see. Sparkling in the lantern light as he went to pass was 3 big diamonds in the frosty grass. Diamonds, says Charlie? Where'd they come from? I'll have to pick them up later on. I always wanted some. Well, then he hauled in his dory, and she felt light as air. And in the pitch-black midnight, he rode out to tend the weir. Now, out by the weir gate, Charlie found A big sea serpent swimming round and round. He had a head like a wash tub, whiskers like thatch, breath like the flame on a Portland star match. Black in the lantern light, up he rose. He had a great big barnacle on the end of his nose. He looked Charlie over, surly and cross. Says, them fish you got in there belongs to my boss. Fish, said Charlie, fish in there? I ain't caught a fish since built the darn wire. Well, says the sea serpent, nevertheless, there's 10,000 bushels, and that's a rough guess. Well, Charlie moved the lantern, and he gave them oars a pull, and soon he saw that whale was brim-belly full. Fish rose out of the water, 1 trillion at a time, and the side of each and every one was like a silver dime. Well, says the sea serpent, what are you gonna do? They're uncomfortable. They don't belong to you. So open that contraption up and let them go. Come on, shake the lead out. The boss says so. Oh, does he? Says Charlie. Well, who the hell's he? Thinks he can sit back and send word on up to me. That sea serpent swirled around so fast he raised a water spout. Says, you keep on, brother. You'll find out. Ah, you're nothing but a lie. You're so old and hoary, and get them filthy whiskers off the gunnel of my dory. That sea serpent fizzled, and he heaved up underneath, and he skun back a set of jagged yellow teeth, and he came at Charlie with a gurgly roar. Well, Charlie let him have it with the port side oar. Right on the noggin, hell of a knock, and that old sea serpent, he sank like a rock. Well, go on back, yells Charlie, and you tell the old jerk not to send a boy to do a man's work. Then over by the weir-gate, tinkly and clear, a pretty little voice says, Yoo-hoo, Charlie dear. Now what? Says Charlie. This ain't funny. And that same sweet voice says, Yoo-hoo, Charlie honey. Setting on a seine pole right in the wire was a pretty green mermaid combing out her hair. All right, says Charlie, I see you, and I know who you come from. You get too. And he let fly his bailing scoop and landed with a clunk. And when the water settled, that mermaid she had sunk. And then the whole ocean moved behind him with a mighty heave and a hiss, and a thundery, rumbly voice remarked, I'm gall darn sick of this. An up-coming old man, he was white from head to toe. He was whiter than a daisy field. He was whiter than the snow. He was carrying a pitchfork with 3 tines on it, muttering in his whiskers, madder than a hornet. My sea serpent's so lame that he can hardly stir. And my best mermaid, you raised a lump on her, and you've been pretty sassy, calling me a jerk. And now the old man has come to do a man's work. Now look, says Charlie, why don't you leave me be? You might be the old man of the sea, but I got a run of fish here locked up inside. If you keep frigging around, you're going to make me lose this tide. Well, the next thing Charlie knew, he was lying on the sand. The painter to his dory was right beside his hand. He could see across the bay. It was calm and still and wide. It was full daylight, and it was high tide. Says Charlie. What am I about? The oars weren't wet. He hadn't been out. Oh, yeah, diamonds? Underneath that tree. Seems to me I found some. I better go see. But he couldn't find any. Not one gem. Just 3 little owl turds with frost on them.
It's so interesting to think about oral story before we really had written language, and how as stories get passed, they're always changing it just a tiny bit according to whoever's telling the story, or like your neighbor now tells a story and you tell the story and he's going to tell it a little different, and then his kid's going to tell it a little bit different, and you wonder, obviously some of these stories and the ones that you tell a lot have like a lot of lessons or information, or in this case something to say about what to do with that plant. And You wonder about like how many versions of those stories would be out there now if we're still telling people stories in the same way we used to, sitting around the fire together and around the hearth, and how much is passed in this way that isn't just in like a tangible object like a book, which could just get burned. It's all gone, you know.
Right.
It's not static story. It's alive in itself.
Right. Certain things mean certain things to certain people, and has more value certain parts.
Mm-hmm.
And that's partially why we're so hooked to all our media. It's because it's basically stories, and then a lot of times they're corporate stories. Now I guess with Facebook they're actually personal stories.
Sometimes, yeah.
I mean, mostly, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah.
Somebody tell them what they think about whatever it is.
Yeah.
I mean, and we're just hooked to it.
Mm-hmm. We're craving that.
TV, it's a corporate story, so that's a little more of a problem. But I never thought of that. But that Facebook, it's kind of, that's what it is.
We're looking for that story connection with each other, but then they kind of co-opt that too, because they'll advertise to you in between your friend trying to share some crazy thing happening in their life, and some meme that someone's sharing that's also kind of a story or like political symbol or something that has a lot that comes out of it, and then maybe an argument ensues, and then the next story comes along, and then, you know, yeah.
You know, it's funny because I actually just recently I told a story there about meeting that Bessie Jones and about root doctors and all like that, and I edited that. It's on YouTube, and it's about an hour-long piece, but it's a good story. Yeah, I recommended it.
Okay, we'll link it in the show notes or something. I'll do some research and find some of these things and put it in so people can watch. Do you have a YouTube channel?
I think I do. Yeah, I think Doug Elliott YouTube, that works.
Yeah. Someone's come and filmed you at times, like videos of you telling your stories and stuff?
Yeah, there's some plant walk stuff, some North Carolina Public Radio came and did a couple excerpts, one on tulip poplars and one on just nature in general. Sweet little, they did sweet little jobs, and there's some fun. There's some fun plant walks, and that one piece, we kind of edited it and worked it up. And
cool.
It really, and I just remember the author of that Instructions for Life was Mary Oliver.
Oh right, I mean, she's pretty famous.
Just so you can, I don't know if you can put that in again. Okay. And if you need to, you can go over.
Yeah, Mary Oliver. Yeah, I'm sure some people who are Mary Oliver fans are like, "That's Mary Oliver." Like.
Oh yeah, I see it on the bottom of people's emails all the time.
Yeah.
It's so true.
Yeah.
Pay attention, be astonished, tell about it.
Share that. Yeah. Inspire other people to create story in their own lives, you know. One thing I was curious about, your life here is really cool. Tell me a little bit about, this is something Matt Hansen told me to ask you about. He's like, make sure you ask Doug to talk about Yana and Todd. So Yana's your wife.
Right.
And Todd's your son, who are very exceptional, interesting people in their own right. And y'all's life here has been really like close to the land. You grow your own food. You do, I don't know, a lot of crafts. Like, what has it been like? I mean, what are these people like? You know, what?
Well, Yana, right now, Yana is into gardening more than ever. She has hundreds of varieties of plants. And what we realized was that she been specialized when Todd was a little boy. He loved sweet potatoes, so she started getting sweet potatoes. And the neighbors would say, well, here's one called Nancy Hall. This is a sweet tater. And here's one called O. Henry. Next thing you know, she started collecting all these sweet potatoes. And next thing you know, she had maybe a dozen varieties. And now she's trying to keep less than 100 varieties.
She's trying to hunt down now.
Trying to keep less than 100 varieties of sweet potatoes, just sweet potatoes. And we realized that sweet potatoes are a tropical crop. We grow them here, and how do we grow them? We dig them up in the fall before the frost comes. Put them away, leave them dormant for a couple of months, and then wake them up in the spring, take the little shoots, put the shoots in the ground, and that's what you grow the sweet potato from. In the tropics, all they do is they just cut the tip of the vine, stick it in the ground, and they get another sweet potato plant. That's what we do. So you go, well, what about all these tropical plants? What about taro? What about cassava? What about ginger? What about turmeric? What about chayotes? And so we're realizing that using some of those same techniques, we can actually grow tropical plants that you'd see in Hawaii and stuff like that. And she's involved in the Utopian Seed Project, and one of their missions is to trial different kinds of crops for southern gardens. And so that's what she's doing right now. So basically, I always tease her the place. You turn the whole house into an agricultural experiment station. She's got, I don't know if you've seen that whole room. She's got cases and cases of all the stuff that she's harvested, different kinds of roots. Mm-hmm. And Todd kind of got, it was pre-verbal, was into mushrooms.
Wow.
And I used to carry him around in a pack basket, and he'd point them out and go, shoo, shoo. That was his way for mushrooms. And he just got into it really early, and started taking pictures when he was a teenager. And some of those pictures are in his book, which is, I think, which is Mushrooms of the Southeast, which is...
Right, he wrote basically a guide. So, like, before he probably even went to college, he was already an expert. And so then he has his PhD in...
Well, almost.
Almost. Working on it.
Yeah.
But he's already written a book about mushrooms in the South.
Yeah, field guide. It's pretty good, and it's selling. I've had 2 or 3 printings.
Wow.
And so it's going good. And he's going to come back, I think. He realized he worked out a way that he could study in Australia, and it wasn't going to cost him anything, and he actually getting paid a little bit. Mm-hmm. And so he hopes to come back with a doctorate, and who knows what he'll do next, but...
Is he? He's adventurous like you are.
Yeah, he's been to 6 continents on expeditions.
Really?
Yeah.
And he's what, 30?
Just about.
Almost.
Yeah. Yeah. He learned how to do emergency medical stuff, EMT work. Mm-hmm. He's a good photographer, and also knows a lot about mushrooms. So that's kind of been his ticket, and he gets to go on these expeditions. Mm-hmm. And he's also strong as an ox, so he can carry packs. And
he's willing to do the hard work too, as much as he is taking the photos. And,
right.
Yeah.
So we'll see what he does when he comes back.
Maybe hang out here for a little while.
We're hoping so.
Yeah.
We might have to do gigs like his old man. Who knows?
Really, hang around. Well, he built his own little place.
Built a little cabin down the road.
Down the road that you have other people stay in sometimes when he's not here, and
when it works out. Yeah.
When it works out, yeah. Cool. Wow. All before the age of 30, writing a book, getting a PhD. Maybe before 30 he'll get his PhD.
Yeah.
6 continents. That's pretty cool. Yeah.
Oh, leaves me slack-jawed.
You're like, wait. That puts my traveling in my 20s to shame. And
yeah.
he sings, he'll play, some of your recordings, he's in there singing and playing music with you, right?
Yeah, he's a good fiddler, a pretty good fiddler.
Yeah. You haven't seen him in a while, probably.
No.
Because of COVID and him being all the way over.
Yeah, we got to go over there once.
Mm-hmm.
That was great fun.
Yeah.
Kangaroos in the backyard. I mean, just amazing.
Really big snakes, maybe.
Yeah, not really, not too big. Well, I guess pretty big.
Round and round old Joe Clark, round and round I say. Round and round old Joe Clark, 'cause I'm gone away. Went to see old Joe Clark, he was sick in bed. Stuck my finger down his throat and pulled out a chicken head. Oh, round and round old Joe Clark, round and round I say. Round and round old Joe Clark, 'cause I'm gone away. He had a mule, name was Morgan Brown. Every tooth in that mule's mouth was 18 inches round.
Big mule.
since she was born. Took two jaybirds 40 years to fly from horn to horn. Round and round old Joe Clark, round and round I say. Round and round old Joe Clark, 'cause I've gone away.
Never marry a fiddle player, I'll tell you the reason why. He blows his nose in old cornbread and calls it pumpkin pie.
Yum! Never marry a harmonica man, I'll tell you the reason why. Never puts his harmonica down and he never zips his fly.
Whoa!
Round and round old Joe Clark, round and round I say. Round and round old Joe Clark, 'cause I've gone away. Loved to fish, he'd fish every day. Every time he'd catch a fish, that thing would get away. Oh, round and round old Joe Clark, round and round I say. Round and round old Joe Clark, 'cause I'm gone away.
I guess I'd say one thing I would say is that one of the best ways to know the creator is to study creation. That's kind of been my mission, studying creation, trying to learn all I can about this magical thing we're all a part of.
Mm-hmm. Maybe we could go enjoy the fresh air outside and do some stuff outside for a little bit.
Yeah, that sounds good. See what Yana and Squirrel are
Yeah.
into.
Cool. All right, thanks, Doug, for sitting down with me. It was fun.
Great to be with you.
Yeah, it was great to be with you, too. You just listened to a conversation with Doug Elliott on the Ground Shots podcast. The songs and stories featured in this episode were Black Snake, Groundhog Love, The Travel Urge and the Magic Token, Left Hind Leg of a Rabbit, Muskrat, Dandelion Song, Ain't No Bugs on Me, Ginseng and the Largest Living Thing, Apples, Fools, Fish or Freedom Song, Raccoon and Possum, Cluck Ol' Hen, The Night Charlie Tended Weir, Old Joe Clark. You can download and buy them on his Bandcamp page, which is linked in the show notes of this episode. To support this podcast, which is listener funded, find us on Patreon at patreon.com/ofsedgeandsalt. You can also support the podcast through PayPal, Venmo, Cash App. Links for doing that are in the show notes for this podcast episode. This episode was hosted by me, Kelly Moody, edited by me and Ted Packard.
The big black snake, he's crawling across me yard. Well, there's a big black snake, he's crawling across my yard. He may be moving slow, but Lord, he's working hard. Well, he's slipping and a sliding, he's weaving and a gliding, creeping and a crawling. Lord, he's really hauling. Well, there's a big black snake, he's crawling across my yard. Well, there's a big black snake, he's messed with my setting hen. Well, that big black snake, he's messed with my setting hen. Well, I run him off, but Lord, he's back again. And you know what he's doing? He's slipping and a sliding, weaving and a gliding, creeping and a crawling. Lord, he's really hauling. With that big black snake, he's crawling across my yard. big black snake just hanging there in my tree. With that big black snake just hanging there in my tree. Well, I'm watching him, but Lord, he's watching me. Well, that big black snake crawl around in my peach tree. Well, that big black snake crawl all over my peach tree. Well, that big black snake better let my peaches be. Well, that big black snake, he wants my fresh laid eggs. Well, that big black snake, he wants my fresh laid eggs. Well, I'll run him off, I don't care what it takes. 'Cause he's slipping and a sliding, weaving and a gliding, creeping and a crawling. Lord, he's really hauling. Well, that big black snake, he's crawling across my yard. He may be moving slow, but Lord, he's working hard.